All right. Welcome back into another edition of Jake's Takes. I am your host, Jake Massucci, and I am super excited for another edition of the show. Today, I got on my guys. I got AJ Massucci and Matt Griffin here with me today. It's season 3. It's a whole new season of Jake's Takes, and these guys are back at you with some more NBA offseason storylines here. So, AJ, Matt, how we doing, guys?
Doing great. Just watching some Olympic basketball, trying to stay up to date with basketball and everything going around the world. So it's been a great summer so far. Not really doing too much besides golf. And so, yeah, I've been great.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Matt, how we doing, man?
I'm doing great. Also been a lot of Olympic basketball going on over here. I got France, Canada next to you guys right now. I've been enjoying that. It's been a lot of fun. I've been trying to watch the other Olympic sports. I don't understand the most of them. Was unfortunate to see Noah Lyles win yesterday. I was really rooting on his downfall.
Yeah, but you got to root for the American.
Usually you're right, but if you you can be as American as you can be. If you're going to be a LeBron hater, I cannot root for you.
That's fair. That's fair.
Whatever America is on the hierarchy, LeBron is higher.
Some would argue LeBron is America. So
LeBron, yeah, L'America, Captain L'America.
I love it.
If he was president, we wouldn't even be having these debates.
Yep, that's facts.
If he just ran, we wouldn't even have to think about it.
I don't know. I don't think he'd be a great candidate, but that's a story for another day. And potentially,
he came
maybe
back from 3-1. Think about what he could do for every other problem we have.
I guess so. Yeah, would Rich Paul be like his VP? Like just take all of his boys from high school?
Yeah. That's true. He's not great at picking talent. That's not his strong suit. Is picking the cabinet will not be as strong, but that's okay. Well, he doesn't need a good cabinet. He can carry.
Yeah, he'll just carry the team like the old Cleveland days.
Yeah, we don't need the rest of the team. Yeah, I mean, see what he did with Timothy Mozgov? Who cares who his VP is?
$60 million for foreigners.
Yeah, true. That's a great point. Foreign, yeah.
All right.
We loved everywhere.
Let's go on to some actual basketball.
Yeah, no, why don't we get to some actual basketball? Before we start, though, Matt, you ended up starting your own podcast talking about Pistons basketball. So talk to me a little bit about the start of that pod, and you starting that. It's super cool stuff, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I started with my buddy Kyle. It's called Teal or No Teal. It is a Pistons-centric podcast. We talk about the whole league. Actually, just yesterday we recorded an episode that's similar to the one we did today where we tiered every team's offseason, essentially.
Okay.
Obviously, like the Pistons are the focus of it. We talk about the Pistons on every show, but we try to cover the whole league to some varying degree. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's not I mean, we take it seriously, and like I take the analysis part of it seriously, but it's not meant to be like it should be. I hope for it to be fun to listen to. Is how I would describe it. That's the goal. Is that it's fun to listen to, but it's still informative. And obviously, we're new to it. We're only about 6 episodes in, but it has been a lot of fun. I like doing it.
I love it. Super cool stuff. Let's get in.
We would never be here. I'm on your coaching tree.
I appreciate it. Why don't we get into some NBA offseason stuff here? I got a lot of teams written down, and what we're going to do is we're kind of going to go Eastern Conference. We'll take a little break in there, switch over to Western Conference, and kind of jump through as many teams as we possibly can. Kind of the main move of the offseason free agency-wise is probably Paul George going to the 76ers here. So why don't we start in Philadelphia with what happened here? What I have written down is they retained Lowry, Maxey, and Oubre, and then they added Drummond, Eric Gordon, Reggie Jackson, Caleb Martin, and then Paul George, of course. So talk to me about, with you guys, looking at the 76ers going into this year, clearly some disappointment from last year. Talk to me about this new team going into next year.
Yeah, well, first, I think it's worthy to recognize the risk that the 76ers took, and Daryl Morey specifically, because dating back to last year, they had the opportunity to sign James Harden to a long-term extension, which James Harden thought was already agreed upon, and Daryl Morey kind of backed out of that for the 2024 summer cap space plan. They had opportunities to edit at the deadline. They didn't do that to keep this plan intact. And I mean, really, they put all their chips in on Paul George, because if you look at this free agency class, like, Paul George is by far the best player to switch teams. And if that didn't happen, and with all the reporting that's come out since that, like, this Clippers didn't actually make a 5-year max offer, which they were more than capable of doing. They kind of got lucky in a way, but they also put themselves in a position to be the best team with cap space in a long time. They got the best player to switch teams in free agency in a long, long time. And I mean, it's a total home run for them. Like, whether it will work, it's up to debate. Like, we'll see. The health factor will maintain a big factor in that, obviously, because Paul George and Joel Embiid probably aren't the best health bets, but like, they put a top 5 team in the NBA on paper, at least, going into this season. And then I think Caleb Martin was like the steal of the offseason for, like, in terms of a bargain. I'm sure he's regretting not taking that contract from Miami. Reportedly, Miami offered him like 5 years, 65. He ended up getting 4 years, 32 from Philly. But it's a total home run. Like, they use Maxi's small cap hold to open up this max space and give theoretically the best 3-man, like,
Big three.
the best big 3 fit in the NBA, with a small guard that can create, doesn't really need the ball. They got a dominant wing in Paul George, and then they got the second best big guy in basketball. I mean, you can't really draw it up on paper much better than that. So home run for Philly, and they just put themselves right atop the Eastern Conference again.
For sure. Matt, what do you got for me?
Yeah, I agree with what AJ said. Like, they lose. I guess you could say they, quote unquote, lose out on Harden, or they don't pay him. They don't give him the contract that everybody expected them to. Obviously, James Harden especially expected them to, but it kind of worked out. They end up with the most cap space of any team that's competitive at all in this kind of a wide open free agency market, because there wasn't a ton of cap space to be thrown around. And they land Paul George, they like Caleb Martin, and Andre Drummond, say what you want. Like, he shores up the backup center position, which it just feels like has always been a problem for the Sixers a little bit. Like, Paul Reed was the best one that they ever had outside of Drummond when he was there a few years ago. And they always get killed. Like, obviously, you're always at risk of just getting killed in non-Embiid minutes, and Drummond should help. At least, obviously, he's not going to take the game over or anything, but he should help those minutes go smoothly, or relatively smoothly, especially if he's playing with a Maxi or a Paul George, as I'm sure he always will be. But yeah, landing Paul George and Caleb Martin is kind of a home run. It's the health. Like, that's just the biggest thing. Every time we're going to talk about the Sixers for the next year, the first thing you have to mention is, well, can Joel Embiid stay healthy, and now can Paul George stay healthy? Because they aren't very good health bets. I mean, we see year in and year out, even if they're healthy, it doesn't feel like they're often 100%, especially Embiid. But on paper, yeah, I mean, they're one of the best teams in the East. Joel Embiid is kind of the factor of, like, having Joel Embiid gives you more hope than really anybody outside of the Celtics in the East, because it's like the Celtics can guard everybody, but not necessarily Joel Embiid. Like, you actually have the best player in a series, assuming that he's right, and not everybody can say that. And it was a great offseason. It's one of those teams, because like you said, AJ, like, on paper, their big 3, like, archetypally fits really well together. I do want to see them play together. Because I don't know, like, I do kind of get weary a little bit of how Paul George plays, like, within an offense, and how often he kind of goes to do his own thing, and what that'll look like when it's not just he's the second option, or maybe even third option, I should say, really, with how good Tyrese Maxey was last year, and you can kind of expect him to keep getting a little bit better. But, like, what does he look like? Like, when he has to defer as much as I would expect he should with Joel Embiid, I'm curious what that looks like, because as much as we love everything that Paul George can do with the ball and defensively and everything, and he did all that last year, he was great, but he definitely is also a little bit of a ball stopper. And I get that that's okay, because he's as good as he is, but it felt like Tobias Harris, like, there was even extra diminishing returns on Tobias Harris because of his, like, bad habits. And Paul George is way better than Tobias Harris, but they do have some similar, like, bad habits. And if those stuck out so broadly, so clearly on Philadelphia last season. I have a little bit of concern that maybe that type of thing sticks out for Paul George a little bit more than it did in LA.
Yeah. No, I mean that's completely fair. Like, especially with them coming in, like I feel like Embiid is a little bit of a ball stopper also. So you put Paul George, somebody that can be a ball stopper at within that. Yeah, I know. Yeah, for sure, for sure. But I mean, that's one of the things that reason why I've always been on the Jokic side more than Embiid side.
You're right.
That the ball stops with Embiid, you know, and it's clearly like beforehand. Like you could say Embiid was better before Jokic had that the seasons and all that. So like it wasn't as obvious. But the reason is I'm much more likely to like somebody more when the ball doesn't stop with them. You know, and Paul George, the ball can stop with, and Joel Embiid, the ball can stop with. The one person I'm very curious to see with this is Maxey. You know, will Maxey maintain the touches, and will Maxey continue to get better with this? You know, and I love some of the role players they got. Like Eric Gordon, I think is going to be a really good fit with them. He can really shoot it, and will help their bench succeed there. Reggie Jackson, another guard off the bench that'll help him out. Not sure how much playing time he'll get, but we'll see. And then Caleb Martin, it's a guy. AJ talked about him. I mean, like we've seen him dominate a series before. We talked about the Miami Heat, Boston Celtics series 2 years ago now in that conference finals. He was just unbelievable, unconscious. So those are just guys that fit well together, and they're Daryl Morey guys. Daryl Morey likes these kind of guys that can defend and shoot a little bit. With Eric Gordon bringing him back, he had him in Houston earlier. So I'm very excited to see
those 2018 Rockets.
Exactly. He loves that team for sure. So I'm very excited to see. I'm excited to see what the Sixers can do here. But you know, like they're definitely one of the top tier teams, but like there's a lot of teams in the Eastern Conference that are really bulking up. So I'm excited to see how they fare with it.
Well, and one factor too is that Daryl Morey never thinks of his team as complete until the trade deadline's over. Yeah. And they still have 4 first-round draft picks to be traded that are capable of being traded, I should say. And he's willing to go all in with this group, and they've got plenty of matching salary now. I think they're in a position to really rival the Boston Celtics if healthy. And Joel Embiid's a matchup nightmare. And as much as a ball stopper as like he is and Paul George is, like if that's your biggest problem, that an all NBA player is ball stopper, like that's a pretty good problem to have. Now that's probably their second biggest problem because their first problem is health. But if they're healthy, like if they're healthy and they fit well together, like I could see myself favoring them in a series against Boston. But it's just like they got to get to that point, and if they don't, then none of this really matters. But they put themselves in a position to be successful, and that's all you could really ask for from a front office.
For sure.
Yeah, I think going back to the Caleb Martin point real quick, like people always bring up the series against the Celtics where, he was unconscious, and people bring it up rightfully so. But even when he's not playing that, like when he isn't unconscious, I think that there's still a lot of value in having a guy like Caleb Martin. I feel like the Sixers have always just been kind of missing amongst a ton of problems that they have, but especially come playoff time, I always feel like they're missing the role players who are like really gamers, the ones who are going to like get an extra offensive rebound, who are going to sit down and like create a turnover in a big spot. And Caleb Martin is absolutely one of those players. So I think adding him could be really important when it gets down to it. I wish they kept my boy Nick Batum, but I'm looking forward to watching him.
And Kelly Oubre, I think, showed spurts of that last season, especially in that first 2 games of the Knicks series this last playoffs. And keeping him could be huge too. And that allows them to play with size and have shooting on the floor and be very versatile defensively, especially with like 2 non-versatile players in Maxey and Embiid. But if you run out a lineup, like a closing lineup, I would assume will be Maxey, Oubre, Martin, Paul George, and Embiid at this current moment in time. And that's a pretty good defensive lineup with a small guard on the floor like Maxey, who will compete defensively, but at the end of the day, he's like 6'1", and guys can just shoot over him. So, but that allows them to still play with some size and some defensive versatility 2 through 4, which is immensely valuable.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, let's switch over.
My bad. That 2 through 4 they cover a lot of ground, which helps a lot when you're when you're playing with a drop big and a small guard. Like that's gonna help a lot. I have a little. I'm a touch concerned about their rebounding because Embiid's really not as good a rebounder as you would think he is. But I mean, again, like these are small problems, and this should be a really good team.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right, let's switch over to another Eastern Conference contender, which would be the New York Knicks. And they made a big move in the offseason, trading for Mikal Bridges from the Nets. The trade that I wrote down, correct me if I'm wrong, okay, we got Bridges and who was the other one attached to it? Was it Bates Diop?
Nobody important.
Okay. It was Bridges for Bogdanovich, 5 firsts, a pick swap, and 2 seconds. I believe that's the details there. And the Knicks really like stocked up. They got Bates Diop as well. I believe it was either a sign and trade or something. I don't know if it was involved with the Bridges or not. They got Cameron Payne too, but then some of their key losses would be Isaiah Hartenstein, Alec Burks, Shake Milton, and then Bogdanovich, who got traded in that deal. So talk to me about the Knicks offseason and where you guys see the Knicks next year. I'll start with Matt here for this one.
And again, like whatever, I think it's only fair, right, kind of right now to think of the Celtics in their own tier in the East, but I think that the Knicks are with the Sixers in whatever tier is next. I think, like adding Bridges is awesome. I think they didn't, I don't know. I've been kind of dealing with, hey, they lose Hartenstein, but they add Bridges. Like Hartenstein was so important for them last season. Given obviously part of that is that Mitchell Robinson was hurt for a big chunk of the season. So Hartenstein's value was extrapolated in that way. But I mean, Bridges should help them a ton. It's weird. Like they really relied on, for as much as we get excited about kind of how deep this team is and sort of how all the starters are really versatile and they kind of they may not have the 1A superstar, but they have so much talent with that. This team really relied on Jalen Brunson for shot creation last season, especially when Julius Randle went down. Like it was kind of really too much on his shoulders. And I mean, they picked up the slack that he brought defensively and everything. So, I mean, it all kind of worked out. But you definitely, like, watching the playoffs, it felt like when the ball wasn't in Brunson's hands, it just wasn't really like nothing was being created. Nothing was being generated consistently. And Mikal Bridges should help with that because he's not a first option. Hell, I don't even think he's probably a second option. But he will be a damn good third option if you let him. And he's going to – some nights he can masquerade as a good second option. I don't think you can rely on it night to night the same way that you can even a Julius Randle who's not particularly consistent. But like, I mean, if you tell me that you're getting like all defense level Mikal Bridges back, then getting him is a home run. I feel like they gave up a pretty penny, frankly. They gave up a lot. I think that the Nets kind of came away with a quote unquote win in that deal, but I understand the Knicks doing it completely, especially when you consider what they were able to sign Jalen Brunson to. Like, you kind of want to maximize your chances right now, and adding Mikal Bridges does that.
Yeah, I think this deal is worth it for the Knicks for 2 reasons. One, and both of them are non-basketball, frankly. But one is that Jalen Brunson took a $150 million pay cut or $110 million pay cut. I may have that number wrong. But he took a massive pay cut, which allows them to be competitive and re-sign Bridges next summer for like the next 5 or 6 years. And in the new era of the NBA, like that's all you can really ask for is a chance for 5 to 6 years. And maybe you could break through 1 or 2 years like the Boston Celtics kind of did this year, where they kind of got a relatively easy path to the finals, but and with some good health and the health luck, quite frankly. But
Porzingis was out.
Yeah, Porzingis is out, but they played like the Indiana Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah,
like
they're
and so like you got to break through at some point, and this gives you a 5 to 6 year opportunity. You have Jalen Brunson, who I have currently as like the 8th best player in the NBA. And that's the best player that they've had on their team since, I mean, maybe you count Carmelo, probably not. He's probably a higher level than Carmelo was, but
unguardable.
Like since like Patrick Ewing. And so like they gave themselves a shot. And then also like, who else are you going to get on the trade market that's better than this? There's like, I don't really see Embiid coming available in the near future. Giannis doesn't look, and quite frankly, they won't have the best package for those guys. So like getting a second superstar second star, he's not a superstar, but second guy that can really like defensively, like with him and OG on the wing, like that's just unbelievable how good they're going to be on perimeter defensive wise. But this team still doesn't really make sense to me. Julius Randle is kind of just like out there. He's only got 1 year left on his deal, and he doesn't like necessarily fit unless Tibbs wants to play him at the 5. Mitchell Robinson, you can't really trust him from just a health perspective alone. Losing Hartenstein is really killer, but like if they had no way to match the Thunder's offer, so this is the best like kind of replica. But I'm also kind of looking at this team like they're not completed yet.
Yeah,
it feels like there's another move trying to get a center and probably moving Julius Randle in that deal. I don't know. It just feels like they're kind of incomplete because like right now their starting lineup is going to be Brunson, Bridges, OG, Julius, and Mitchell Robinson. Like I don't know. There's not a lot of shooting in that lineup. The floor is still going to be quite condensed. They don't have a second creator. Quite frankly, like this move doesn't really move them a ton for me in the East. I already had them in the top 4. They're still in the top 4, and I would probably still rank them 4th. But it's a move that like I quite frankly would have done because it gives you an extended period of time to really compete for a championship. And at the end of the day, that's what all of this is about. They just I think that there's still more work to be done.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, the Knicks moves were definitely interesting. And like right when I looked at my phone and saw the news, I was like, whoa, this is so sick. The Knicks finally did something because it was all just talk, you know, like it was like, oh, they're going to go after this star. They're going to go after this star. And when they finally made the move, I was like, hey, this kind of works. And then they lost Hardenstein in free agency. And I feel like that kind of put me in your boat where it's like, okay, they got to figure something out, try to make something work because I like Hardenstein a lot more than I still like Mitchell Robinson, you know, and only having one big. Like their value last year was having both of those bigs and being a big team and big presence, you know, and then they lost their depth because they started getting exhausted and, you know, all that. You still have Josh Hart on the team and you still have some depth pieces that I really, really like on the Knicks. But, you know, I agree with you where it just kind of like it gives you the star and it gives you the piece that you want, but it's incomplete. And I like that take there for sure. Matt, you got anything else to add on to that?
No. Yeah, I just think like there's kind of a lot to monitor, I think, with this team, because like you said, it is a little bit incomplete. I think like the rotation, the lineups that you run out there are not super clear. Or like easy, I guess, to just kind of pinpoint. So watching them early in the season, I feel like they're going to be one of the teams that I'm paying a lot of attention to, probably because I don't know exactly how it'll look. Like, is it kind of a lot of Achua at the 5? They didn't really like to do that last season. But if he's with Julius Randle, maybe that, you know, and Randle can kind of load some of the physicality with Achua, maybe that'll help them. I don't know. I'm excited to see what buttons they push, but I'm not. I think that this will be a really good team. Not convinced that they can like compete with Boston, I'll say.
I agree, and I think it's going to be really fun to see all those Villanova guys back together. Even though I hate that Villanova team. But it's going to be really fun. It's a really cool story. It's going to be a cool story to follow. Like they're going to be on the short list of teams to watch, and ESPN will give us plenty of it because it's the New York Knicks. But it'll be a fun season. I'm looking forward to it. And I like at the end of the day, like I would have made this move too.
Yeah.
But I just don't know if it necessarily like moves them.
Yeah.
Significantly in the Eastern Conference because I thought they were already pretty close to this level as is.
Fair enough. So when I was getting ready for the pod this morning, I was trying to find teams to center in on. And as I continued going through the Eastern Conference teams, I was like, okay, I want to talk about the 76ers. I want to talk about the Knicks. Nobody else is really like standing out to me. And then I look at like the Pistons and I look at our thing and I'm like, compared to every other Eastern Conference team, I would much rather talk about the Pistons because I really think all of these moves are actually pretty good. and I kind of liked some of the spots that we put ourselves in. So let's talk about the Pistons here, okay? So some of the additions here, and I mean, we got Matt with a Pistons podcast, so we got to have the best insight here for this. So some of the additions here for the Pistons, we got Malik Beasley, we got Tim Hardaway Jr., we got Tobias Harris, Wendell Moore Jr., Paul Reed, and then we lost Quinn Grimes, Wiseman, Taj Gibson, and then we re-signed Fontecchio and Cade. Okay, so talk to me, Matt. I'll start with you because you got the pod, and I want to hear your opinions on this. Talk to me about your opinion of the Pistons offseason here and how you think we'll be next year.
Yeah, I really love the Pistons offseason. I think I would consider it a very good, very important offseason, but it's not necessarily because of the roster moves. You overhaul the front office, which you needed to. You replace the coaching staff. Not only do you bring in JB Bickerstaff, who I will say not the most inspiring move given all the candidates that there were from my perspective personally, but you also bring in a Fred Vinson, who is maybe the best shooting coach in the world. And getting a guy like that, I don't know exactly how you can pinpoint how important that will be. I guess that we'll see, but he's a dude who's completely shifted players' shooting trajectories. And this is a young team with a lot of players who are extremely talented, but one of the big questions, or the biggest question amongst the entire young core, is will they be able to shoot well enough to play together? You brought in one of the maybe two guys that would give you any confidence that they might be able to at some point. And you surround your young core now, which is about 5 people. You surround them, you get a Tobias Harris, who I have my qualms with Tobias Harris. I think that there's a ton of reason to question how valuable, how impactful he is as an NBA player at this point in his career. But he's still a very competent offensive player who can create for himself a little bit and exist off the ball. You bring in Malik Beasley, just a huge not a huge physically, but a high volume 3-point shooter that's going to get up 7, 8, 9 threes a game. You bring in a Tim Hardaway Jr., who can essentially play the exact same role if need be. You bring in a Paul Reed, who it doesn't necessarily seem like right now is going to be a big part of the rotation, but as far as third bigs go, he's about as good as it gets in the NBA. You kind of created a context that's a real NBA context, and that's all I can ask for, because as much as I love some of the young players on the Pistons, it's all a little bit of a question mark. And I feel like we didn't really get to answer a ton of those questions last year because the context was just so bad. And is the team going to be good? I don't think so. We're still in a phase of the quote unquote rebuild. We're still in a phase of the process where, hey, we got to continue to acquire a bit more talent, and we're not ready to win now. Everybody's too young to win now. We don't really have a real defensive infrastructure. We still need guys to take leaps on both ends of the floor, but this offseason was absolutely a step in the right direction. I think I wouldn't call it the best offseason you could have had, because heading into the offseason, I think we thought there might be one more splash. There might be a Malik Monk. There might be an Isaiah Hartenstein in play, which maybe would take this offseason to a whole new height. But if you knew that you aren't going to get either of those guys, I think you did about as good as you could have.
For sure. AJ, what do you got for me?
So I go back and forth. There's good things and there's bad things. I think on Matt's point with hiring of Fred Vincent, the shooting coach from New Orleans, he's the best shooting coach in the world. Yep. And the Pistons are a team that probably have the most to gain if our young guys can actually shoot in the entire NBA. If Asar can shoot, all of a sudden he's looking like a future all-star. If Ron Holland can shoot, our 5th overall draft pick, which I love, he's looking like he has Jaylen Brown upside. If Isaiah Stewart continues to shoot, Jaden Ivey, the improvement, it vastly goes up if our guys are able to shoot in 2 to 3 years. But I'm very disappointed. All right, let's start here. I'm very, very excited that we got rid of Troy Weaver and Monty Williams. Thought Monty Williams should be put in jail for breach of contract for starting Killian Hayes for 60 games over Jaden Ivey, who's the third most important guy to our rebuild going into the year. So I'm very glad that we got rid of Monty and we got rid of Troy Weaver. I like Langdon so far, I guess. I'm very disappointed that we were not able to manufacture a future first-round pick. We've been rebuilding for 5 years now, and we still have 0 future assets. We are negative in the draft department, which is not good. for a rebuilding team.
Yeah.
But so that was a little disappointing, especially like it seemed like the Pistons were higher on Ron Holland than everybody else is around the league. And it seemed like Memphis wanted to move up. It seemed like a first round pick potentially could have been on the table to move back to 9. We still pick Holland. Boom, still a home run.
Yeah.
But those are all small things. We weren't able to use our cap space to take on bad salary to actually obtain future draft picks. And in the Tim Hardaway trade, we traded away the best player in Quentin Grimes. It seems like we kind of just gave him away. He's about to be a restricted free agent. I know that there were rumors that he didn't want to be here. Well, too bad. That's what the money's for. Mm-hmm. You're a restricted free agency. You don't really have much of a choice because he would be a perfect guy to close a lot of games for us. I do love the Simone Fontecchio signing. Only 2 years though. I wish it would have been more. I would have been willing to go 4 years for even at $15 million a year, even if you double his salary. He's worth that. He's a really good player. But I also understand his point of view of wanting to get back out the market at age 30, where you can still get maybe a bag. I'm okay with the Cade signing, even though it's just the whole point. If Cade's not worth the max, then we got to kind of redo the whole rebuild anyways. So you might as well just do that. That's fine. And then Tobias Harris, who else is going to take our money? But why couldn't the second year be non-guaranteed? I don't think he had $30 million out there waiting for him.
Yeah.
But so that's fine. I like the Malik Beasley signing a lot. I like the Paul Reed. So I like a majority of things that we accomplished. I just feel like we did not do a good enough job of extracting all the value of our cap space and our draft position compared to our draft board. So I just feel I think it's a B- B offseason, which is totally okay. It's above average. And I think we're going to be actually watchable for at least the first half of next season. And the main thing is internal development. And if internal development does not take place for another year, then we've got to start asking questions if we just wasted 4 years under Troy Weaver tanking every year.
Yeah. For me with this offseason, I just had such low expectations that any positives for me were just absolutely huge. Hiring Fred Vincent, absolutely huge. Getting guys like Malik Beasley. I like the Tim Hardaway Jr. signing too, and I like Paul Reed. All those signings, huge. Fontecchio coming back, huge. All of that was just huge for me in the fact that we're doing some positive things, because I have such low expectations right now for the Pistons and where we've been and how things have been ran. And, with all this new stuff coming in, I think it's very much we'll see, and that's a lot of things with off seasons. That's kind of just what you go with. It's a lot of questions. Oh, we'll see if this works. We'll see if this happens. I feel like for the Pistons, this might be a 1-2 year, we'll see, because this is Fred Vincent's first year working with these guys. So it's not their jumpers aren't gonna be amazing coming out the gates. It took a while for Lonzo Ball, it took a while for Brandon Ingram, all of that with the shooting in New Orleans. And then same thing with the coaching staff too. Most of the time, the first year as a coach, it's not the greatest, because you're installing your system. That's in basketball or in football, and with NBA basketball, that doesn't matter as much because it's more about the talent. But still, with Detroit, there's a little more talent than we had last year, but it's not I don't think we should be expecting play-in or anything like that. I still think we're one of the worst teams in the East, and I'm just not sure where that'll go.
So I think the East might be just really, really bad at the bottom, because Brooklyn is going to be the worst team in the NBA, I think. And then Wizards will be the second worst team in the NBA. I think those teams won't get to 20 wins. Mm-hmm. So I feel like the Pistons should be above them. And then the Bulls, I think, just are going to be bad, flat out bad, probably high 20s. I could see a world where if everything breaks right and Cade really is takes another leap, I could see a world where we're competing for the 10th seed. I don't want to be competing for the 10th seed. I'd rather be tanking for one more year. But I could see a world where all of a sudden we finish at 31 wins and we're missing out of the play-in by 2 games. I just think the East is going to be that bad this year, where that could be a realistic possibility where there's a real fall off between 9 and 10. But but I don't think competing for the play-in is the goal. I think we need to see real development from Cade where he's like in the all-star conversation, in like, the bubble of all NBA consideration. We need to see Ivy, like whether he's coming off the bench or starting, he needs to take like a real leap and show that he's a point guard. And somebody that can actually like be playable defensively. Jalen Duren needs to actually contest shots at the rim at a high level. And Asar needs to show that he's not a walking turnover and that he can actually hit an occasional open three and be willing to take them. And a true like all NBA all NBA conversation defender. I think those are the more important things to the season rather than the win total. But like I could definitely see a world where like if we don't sell off at the deadline, like I think we probably should, like we're in competition for that 10th seed bubble type area, which could be fun, but overall I don't think that's the direction to go in.
Fair enough. Matt, you got anything to add?
Yeah. The 10th seed in the East, like if you map it out now, it's just going to be a bad team. So which bad team, you don't really know. Like it could be the Raptors, could be the Bulls, who knows? But like it's probably going to be a bad team. So there is some like fleeting, the Pistons could touch it. I will say like the Pistons are pretty far away from like the Bulls and some of those, like Vegas thinks that way, at least, that we're like clearly the third worst team in the East. But yeah, I mean, this season is absolutely about internal growth. I think that there's nothing more important than the guys that we have in the building right now just getting better. And there's any number. I think that Ivy has like multiple avenues of showing, hey, I'm a lot better this season. He could absolutely improve as a shooter. He could absolutely improve as a finisher. I think as a defender, he has to improve. Like a lot of these guys have a bunch of avenues. Jalen Duren has got multiple avenues of being better on offense. We know he has to get better defensively or else none of it really matters that much. But I mean, he's dealing with some injuries last year. I do think like you said, Monty Williams breached his contract last season, essentially. I don't really like, it's hard to take a ton of value off of what I saw last year, especially from the young guys, just because of how bad a lot of the context was. But yeah, the team should be better. I mean, they replaced like the minutes of the Killian Hayeses and James Wisemans and Evan Fourniers and Alec Burks. Like those terrible minutes are now, flawed NBA players, but NBA players. Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway Jr., Paul Reed, Malik Beasley, like actual NBA players playing in those spots, I think is gonna do wonders for everybody.
Yeah, and I remember seeing a thing. It was like estimated wins added through free agency, and the Pistons added like 26 wins because they got rid of James Wiseman and added Tobias Harris. So like, and it's in like Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway and all these guys. And I don't even know if like Tim Hardaway is going to get minutes if everybody's healthy, but like at the end of the day, like that's a great thing is that we have an NBA guy that's a borderline rotation player that like, but we also just have guys that need minutes that are more important to the franchise in the future. So like, I think a successful season would be like 26 wins and internal development where Cade's in all NBA discussion or all-star discussion. And we see like true flashes of him being like the guy. And then like flashes from everybody else and more consistent play from like Asar, Ivy, Duren. We see flashes from Holland. Like it's all going to be about the flashes. And we didn't really get a chance to see that this year. I think as Pistons fans, partially we're saying that because of the context and we're making excuses for it. But at some point, you just got to be good. Yeah. And Cade hasn't done that for like an extended period of time yet. Ivy hasn't done that for an extended, like none of these guys have. Like Asar, I think flashed. I think that was pretty clear. But we need to see that for like an extended period of time and like maybe like 1 to 2 months of like real NBA basketball where we're either like hovering around 500 in that stretch or slightly below. And I'd feel a lot more confident heading into next year with another high draft pick. And then the next year's the year to really make a leap.
Keep moving up for sure. Before we get to the West, is there any other East moves that stood out to either of you guys? I'll start with AJ for this one.
Yeah. So this is going to be smaller ones, but I think the Milwaukee Bucks, with their limited resources, had a very good offseason, especially with the signing of Gary Trent on the minimum and the signing of DeLon Wright on the minimum. I think those are two like NBA rotation, like playoff rotation players. There's a difference between like Tim Hardaway being an NBA rotation player and Malik Beasley, NBA rotation player, and like playoff rotation players. Yeah. And I think they took two flyers on these guys. And if Giannis, Brook, Dame, and Chris Middleton are healthy, like either one of these could be like a critical closing five piece for them. And even Taurean Prince on the minimum is a good signing for Milwaukee. So I think that with their limited resources, they couldn't give anything but minimums because they're in the second apron. I think that they just gave themselves a chance to potentially win the East with these signings because Gary Trent played his best basketball with Damian Lillard in Portland. He's kind of been lost in Toronto the last couple of years, as everybody in Toronto has been the last like 3 or 4 years. And I think that like this actually gives them a real shot to compete in the East. And I think you guys will see that later.
I like that. Matt, you got anybody that stood out for you in the East? Any moves?
I was definitely going to take the Bucks because, like you said, I mean, there just wasn't really a lot of avenues for them to improve, and they absolutely did. We talked about it on Taylor No Taylor yesterday, but like I said, the DeLon Wright, like those dudes are upgrades from what they had. They exist in whatever tier is between, like the role player tier that's between, like you said, like Tim Hardaway, like guys who can help you in the regular season, and like the Celtics role players. They exist in what's ever between those two. But yeah, like DeLon Wright could not be more important for a team than he will be for the Bucks this season, if I had to guess. But one that caught my Kentavious Caldwell-Pope to the Magic, I think was a great move. That's the team that was in desperate need of shooting, and KCP's not going to shoot 10 threes a game, but he's going to be really important offensively for them. For a team that needs literally anything on that end of the floor. I mean, they need shot creation. They need everything that you can need offensively. But shooting is definitely one of them. They were one of the worst shooting teams in the league last year, and they had a really good shooter who really strengthens them defensively. I mean, this was one of the two best defenses in the league last year. Like that is their identity, is how well they can piece together stops and get out in transition. And Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, I mean, he's about as good of a two-guard defender as you're going to get in the league. I mean, not a lot of guys better at navigating screens. Not a lot of guys better at the point of attack. He's gonna really help them.
And the defensive combo between him and Jalen Suggs on the perimeter, I mean, that's just scary. Like as a point guard, and he doesn't take. So he definitely does not take away. He probably adds to their defense, which is their identity, like Matt said. And then he just provides like real spacing, which they were dying for in that Cleveland series, and it really gives us a chance to see how good Franz can be, how good Paolo can be. And that's really exciting because at the end of the day, like those are the two guys, and I think Suggs to some level, like those are the three guys that they really need to hit. And they were able to do it on just a 3-year contract. It's kind of crazy to me that Denver didn't match that. But we can get to them later. But I really think that like they made strides in the right direction and are giving their two young guys a chance to really succeed.
For sure. Well, we are going to switch over to a little break, and when we get back, we'll switch over to some Western Conference moves.
Welcome, everybody, to the JOMO Show, your home for Oakland sports and beyond from WXOU. My name is Giovanni Mosheri, and I am the host of the one and only show that covers the Oakland University Golden Grizzlies each and every week. Subscribe to the JOMO Show for weekly interviews with athletes and coaches, for a recap of the week's action at OU, and whatever else is going on in the sports world. You can tune in on 88.3 FM WXOU or wherever you get your podcasts each week. Go Golden Grizzlies on the JOMO Show.
Are you seeking connection, harmony, or a deeper sense of purpose? We believe spirituality is a universal language. Whether you find purpose in prayer, meditation, or simply connecting with nature, Merkaba is here to embrace your unique path. Merkaba, elevating consciousness through fashion. Visit Merkaba.shop or follow us on Instagram at Merkaba to explore our unique world of fashion. And our all-new fragrance line, handmade in Detroit, Michigan. Use code JAKESTAKES123 for 10% off any order. This exclusive offer only lasts for a limited time.
All right. Welcome back into the show. And we are going to flip over now into the Western Conference. So let's start with the Dallas Mavericks, who made the finals last year, had an incredible season, and they were pretty busy during the offseason. What I have written down is they added Spencer Dinwiddie, Quinn Grimes, I think it's Raul Marshall, and then Klay Thompson, and then they lost Najee Marshall. I'm thinking of who am I thinking of?
No clue.
I'm
thinking of the Oakland forward. That's what I'm thinking of. The Oakland forward that made the NBA in 2006. That's what I'm thinking of. That's all right.
What's his name? Who are you thinking?
Raul Marshall.
What's that guy?
I'm pretty sure that's where I'm thinking. I don't know. My head might be just completely filled. I don't know what's going on. And then their losses were Josh Green, Tim Hardaway Jr., and Derek Jones. So I'll start with AJ here. AJ, talk to me about your opinion of the Mavs offseason.
Yeah, so I think they definitely gained a lot of depth and a lot of different options for Jason Kidd to go to in that kind of fifth starter mold. So basically, their only key loss was Derek Jones, who closed and started every playoff game for them. Mm-hmm. Josh Green, rotation piece, fine. I think in getting something back for and not taking any real salary back and getting a second round pick for him was the second most insane deal of the offseason. Because I don't think he's necessarily worth his contract because he doesn't really shoot good enough to be respected as a shooter, and he's not really a lockdown defender. I don't know. I just think he's at the end of the day, a rotation forward. So getting a second round pick from Charlotte for him was a pretty good deal, in my opinion, and not having to give away seconds for that. And then to get off of Tim Hardaway's $19 million in this season to open up this flexibility and get Quentin Grimes back for only 3 second round picks. I mean, we talked about in the Pistons section, I think Quentin Grimes is the best player in that deal, and they only had to give away 3 second round picks to save $16 million this season and open up this kind of flexibility. I think that's an absolute home run for them. Spencer Dinwiddie played his best basketball that he's played in his career on this Dallas team. So getting him back on the minimum, great, love it. And then in Najee Marshall, they used the taxpayer or the mid-level on him, and not even a full one. That was one of my favorite deals of the offseason. He can shoot the three better than Derek Jones can. He's probably a little bit worse of he's not going to get up into you like Derek Jones did, and he's not as big, but he's probably can guard more different types of players than Derek Jones can. And then Klay Thompson, I mean, he kind of speaks for himself, but adding that level of shooter to play with Luka and Kyrie, you can't help off of Klay for he has his faults now. He's not he can't really guard the perimeter on defense, which is going to be an interesting sort of storyline to watch. Is they probably had to guarantee him that he's a starter. I don't think he'll end up closing a lot of games for them just because of that perimeter defensive role that they need to be filled. And because this is the position that it has to be filled. So I think you will see a lot more Quentin Grimes, a lot more Najee Marshall closing games than Klay Thompson, but just adding that level of shooter offensively, it's going to be really tough to guard them. Really, really tough to guard them. And they got a ton of options now. They're a lot deeper. I really like what they did. This was kind of I wouldn't say a home run because it's not that fifth spot's not filled.
Yeah.
But they've got several different options that they can go to based off the night, where just kind of whoever's playing better, and it gives Jason Kidd a lot of flexibility in his options. So I'm really excited for him. I'm really excited to watch Klay on a different team. It's going to be a little weird, especially when he goes back to Golden State at some point. But it's going to be a cool storyline to follow.
Yeah. Before we continue with the Mavs, I looked it up. Okay. Raul Marshall was the Oakland forward, and he played for the Dallas Mavericks for a little while. So that's what confused me. All right. I saw Marshall, I saw Dallas Mavericks, and he was just at practice the other day. So I just met him. So I'm sorry. That's my bad. But okay, Matt, continue with some Mavs talk here.
Yeah. I like their offseason. I mean, point blank period, you were in the finals, and I think you got a little bit better. There's not much more you got to say than that. I do think losing Derek Jones is going to be important. I think he was great last year. I think Dallas was the perfect spot for him, which is an important part to mention of it. Like when you think about the Clipper side of them getting him, but adding Najee Marshall kind of in that spot or in that vein is the more defensive centric wing. But Najee can do way more with the ball in his hands. He can actually shoot it. He's like a relatively good passer. He's good in transition. Like I'm kind of a big fan of Najee Marshall. I like what he brought to the Pelicans last year. Another guy that Fred Vincent helped. But I think like adding Clay is great. I'm excited to watch that. I think, like you said, it's just kind of like he's just another weapon offensively, and not really the type of weapon that they had last year. I'm excited to see how that looks with Luka and Kyrie because, again, like you mentioned, you literally cannot help off of him. He's one of the 2 best shooters that's ever walked, or maybe one of the 3 best shooters that's ever walked. And I mean, what that looks like next to maybe the best playmaker in the league is really interesting. I do kind of have a little bit of concerns, like you mentioned. I mean, if they feel like they have to start him and by proxy sort of have to close with him, what does the defense look like on the perimeter?
Yeah.
I have questions about that big time. But there's no doubt that they got better. Adding Quentin Grimes is going to be big if he's healthy. I mean, it's kind of been a few years here now in a row where Quentin Grimes just hasn't really been able to stay on the floor. And I think that that's kind of the other layer of the Pistons moving on from him and adding guys like Beasley and Hardaway and Paul Reed, who have all been super, super available the last few seasons. Like none of those guys really missed much time last year. And Quentin Grimes has been missing a lot of time now. Like it feels like he's like just kind of an injury laden, like ridden guy. So if he can stay healthy, he's going to be awesome there because he is going to be like their best guard defender. Probably he's going to be able to make threes. Like he's going to fit perfectly with Luka and Kyrie, or when one of them goes out, like he's going to fit those lineups really well. So I'm hoping he can stay healthy because I do like Quentin Grimes a lot. But that's my one concern is just, hey, will you be able to guard guys when you're kind of playing what's supposed to be your best lineup? Because you're kind of going to be really relying on Derek Lively, and he was phenomenal last season. But relying on him and PJ Washington to sort of support an entire championship level defense, like that's kind of a lot to ask of anybody, let alone those two.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I really like what the Mavs did, like just like you guys were saying with Quentin Grimes. Like he's just a stud. He's one of my favorite players to watch from his Houston days and in the NBA. You know, he's just a flat out competitor. And I love those guys that defend really hard and play the game super hard. He's a fun guy to watch and would be really good if he's able to stay healthy, like you guys were saying. With Clay on this team, I really like the fit there because he's just such a good catch and shoot shooter. And it's going to be so nice for a guy like Luka to have one of those guys that's just like lethal. And he can be a guy that can come off screens, and I think Jason Kidd can use him in really good ways to come off screens. And really, like, he doesn't have any on-ball responsibilities at all. In some games, they won't even really need him to score that much, and they can still win because they have so much scoring on this team. There's less pressure on Clay to have monster offensive games that where he can kind of hopefully get back to some of his defensive ways too, like put more effort there on the defensive side of the ball as well. I know he's not as quick as he used to be with all the injuries that he's had, but there's less pressure on him to be that guy all the time than where it was in Golden State. So I think that'll be nice for Clay. It's just like you were saying, Matt, earlier with like, will they try to make him close games and stuff like that? He's got to be willing to be just that role player. And that'll be something we've never really seen from Klay Thompson. So I think that'll definitely be interesting. And I do like the Spencer Dinwiddie ad as well. He's a really good guard off the bench that can create things and do specific things that I think can be very helpful for them. And, you know, we'll just add some versatility as well. So I think overall with the Mavs, it's really good what they did. And I think all of us knew that it was possible that the Mavs could make it out of the West. I really didn't think they would get past like everybody. Like I picked the Timberwolves in the conference finals, and in the second round I picked the Thunder over them. So like, you know, with the West, the Thunder loaded too, but like the Mavs are clearly like at the top right now and can definitely like defend their title with this and got better from it. So I'm excited to see what the Mavs can do. Anything else you guys got on the Mavs before we move on?
Just real quick, like I would say, like by no means this year were they the favorites going in. They were probably but they got better, and the West continues to get better year in and year out, and they maintain their puncher's chance in the Western Conference. And like every year with Luka, you have to take advantage of because he's a top 3 player in the world.
Yeah.
And probably on a majority of nights, he might be the best player in the world. And so you got to take advantage of every single year. And they did a great job, like continuing to improve their team. They weren't just like, we made it to the finals. Obviously, like there's nothing wrong with our team. Our team's great. They went out and they got better, I think, and gave themselves more outs rather than just making the bet that Derek Jones can repeat his best career year, which I think is the right decision at the end of the day. So I really like what they did and their kind of mindset going into it, going into the offseason, and they continue to give themselves a puncher's chance in a really tough conference.
For sure.
Can I ask, what do you consider their best lineup?
I would say offensively or just period, like in the playoffs,
Period.
regular season.
Yeah, in the playoffs.
So I would say they're fully healthy.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I would go Kyrie, Luka, or Luka, Kyrie, and then I would say Quentin Grimes, PJ, and Derek Lively.
I'd say the same.
Yeah, I would too.
That relies heavily on like Quentin Grimes looking like 2 years ago, Quentin Grimes, where he's getting up like 10 threes a game
and defending
at a high level. But otherwise, but if he's not, then it would be Najee Marshall in for Quentin Grimes. That is.
Yeah,
that's fair. Yeah, Quentin Grimes is going to be really important because like I think the first thought maybe with that, or like the first negative thought with that is like, well, it's kind of 3 guards, but defensively, Luka's not a guard. Like he doesn't guard guards. He's just guarding. He's guarding the worst wing usually. He's really a 3.
Yeah, and PJ Washington's a big 4, and Lively's like 7'1". So I think that like they might be a little bit smaller. Like last year, they were huge with Derek Jones Jr. at 3, but they have so much more space. They have so much more space offensively, where you don't have to rely on PJ Washington and Derek Jones hitting 40% of their threes like they did against OKC. And you also like Quentin Grimes can do 2 dribbles and a decision off of a closeout, and Derek Jones like he kind of can't. And when you saw that, like their lobs totally got taken away against Boston, like this just kind of gives them more options. They still have the lob game with the 2 centers that they do have, but it gives them more outs and more shooting on the perimeter, which I think is more valuable.
Quick question too, on that aspect. Like, how do you think the Mavs are going to use Klay Thompson on the offensive end and on the defensive end? Do you think they'll be running like shooter plays for him, or do you think he'll be more of just like a catch and shoot guy, kind of stand off to the side?
I think they run action. Go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, I'm sure that they'll run sets and a lot of actions for like it's Klay Thompson, of course. Like you're not going to use him like he's Grant Williams, but like I don't know. It's not a team that really relied a ton on like structured offense. I felt like, and
I know that's why it'll be good
too. Yeah, but I think it'll be good to have Klay Thompson having it. Like they didn't really have a guy. I guess Kyrie was really the guy when they would run sets who they would run them for oftentimes, and he's great at that. But I mean, you'd always prefer to have more options if you can. And as much as it'll help just having him spotting up, which it will help if you can have Klay Thompson 1 pass away, and that like changes the way you have to guard guys, which you didn't really have last year outside of Luka and Kyrie. So they don't need to run a ton of offense for him. I'm sure that he'll get his in the flow as much as anybody really can, but I think that you'll see a decent amount of offense ran for him as well, especially when Luka's not on the floor.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised. So when Luka is on the floor, like I would not be surprised to see like a lot of back screens for him because Luka's the best weak side passer in the NBA. Like, and he like just like him taking 2 dribbles towards the right side of the floor and then right hand like overhead pass to the corner, like it's right on the money. Like so, you'll see a lot of that stuff. If Kyrie or Luka go down for an extended stretch of time, I wouldn't be surprised to see him and Lively kind of develop a little 2-man game at the high post area.
Yeah.
And then, like, if you try to put 2 on the ball against Luka, like, I mean, they're just going to torch you with Lively's decision making and Klay on the weak side. I mean, that's just a nightmare. And so, like, he'll be used as a spacer. They'll
Probably in Spain too. Also, that would actually
I was going to say, like, he's going to screen for Luka a lot, I bet.
Yeah. Okay. For sure. Why don't we flip over into the Pelicans?
I just had a thought.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so the Warriors run a ton of post splits, right, with Steph and Clay. What if Luka is the post up guy and they run splits with Clay and Kyrie?
Yeah,
Luka's in like the Draymond role. That'd be sweet.
Yeah, right. There's just a million different things that you can do when you have a shooter like Clay and a passer like Luka and Kyrie. And even like Lively's taking steps towards that direction. Like, you can do limitless things with him offensively. It's just like at the end of the day when you got like 5 minutes in Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals, I don't think he can necessarily guard guards, and that's what they're going to need out of that position, and hence why he's not in our closing lineups. Yeah. Even though, like, offensively, like, just adding him, like, that's going to spark they might have the best offensive
rating in NBA.
In the end, like, there'll be the discussion if Luka stays healthy and Clay has like a good shooting year. Like, it's going to be unfair at times.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Why don't we flip over to the New Orleans Pelicans, who made the big ad of getting DeJounte Murray? I'm going to start with Matt for this one. Matt, what was your reaction to them making the trade for DeJounte?
Reaction to making the trade for DeJounte? Well, I think initially my first reaction was, that's intriguing. Was definitely curious. Like, I still don't understand how this whole thing's going to work. I still don't understand what their lineups are going to look like. I really don't. They have 6 starters for 4 spots. Nobody that's really playable right now plays. Like, their starting center is Daniel Tice. And I think Brandon Ingram's coming off the bench, I guess. They had maybe the weirdest offseason, or at least heading into the year, the weirdest, like the team that I feel the weirdest about, because there's obviously a ton of talent there. I feel like they overpaid for DeJounte Murray a little bit. I'm really not a big DeJounte Murray guy. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's still adding talent, so there's value to that without a doubt. And I'm curious to see, like, the Pelicans had a real problem closing games last year. And DeJounte, if like there's one thing that he can do, it's close games. So I get it in a vacuum why the Pelicans wanted DeJounte. Kind of sucks that he can't throw lobs. Would like a guard that can throw lobs next to Zion. A lot of dump offs from old DeJounte. But I get it. But they don't have a center. They don't have a playable center. Yves Missy is not ready to go right now, I'm afraid, as much as I'm intrigued. That's my thought. Who's playing center? That's my thought on the Pelicans. Who's playing center?
Yeah, like they're a team that's not complete. Like, they're taking the Sixers model to a whole nother level because they have 0 playable centers right now. Daniel Tice is a backup center. And they're like Trey Murphy's. Yeah, Trey Murphy has to start. Jones has to start. DeJounte has to start, and Zion has to start. So that leaves Brandon Ingram on the bench. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a huge Brandon Ingram fan. And they have CJ McCollum.
Yeah.
Their team just doesn't make sense right now. I think, like, there's rumors that, like, now that Lauri Markkanen's going to sign his contract extension with Utah, that Brandon Ingram might be going to Utah, which would be interesting. But those are just rumors. So until it actually happens, like, something's got to give. And I'm confused. Like, I would have done the DeJounte Murray deal just from a asset price standpoint. Like, I'm not a believer in Dyson Daniels really at all, especially with Zion and Brandon Ingram. And just like they have a lot of guys. So consolidation trade was kind of necessary. And it seems like another one's kind of necessary because, like, Brandon Ingram's too good to come off the bench. He's going to be ticked.
Yeah.
In training camp, he wants like a max extension. Nobody wants to give him a max extension. I'm just confused.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, they don't make sense. But, like, I really like the starting lineup of DeJounte, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Zion. I really like that. Really, really like that top 4. They just need one more piece. And we kind of thought that would come in a Brandon Ingram trade, and that is yet to take place. And, like, training camp starts in a month. Mm-hmm. So unless they are able to work out a trade with Utah and get Walker Kessler, like, okay, now we're kind of and maybe a couple picks too, and then you package that to go get a real center.
Yeah.
There's just like one more move. Like they're one move away from me being all in on them because I really like them, and I think CJ McCollum would be a great 6-man.
Yeah.
I kind of think that's the level of player he is now, and like that, scoring guard off the bench like that. I mean, he's gonna be 6-man of the year conversation if he does come off the bench. Like I'm very intrigued. Get rid of Brandon Ingram, and I will love this team. I will love this team
for sure. For sure.
A lot of mid-range jumpers between Brandon Ingram and DeJounte.
Yeah, that's
the thing. Like, I feel like they need CJ shooting in the starting lineup a little bit.
But if they have Trey Murphy will get him up, and he's a high-level shooter.
But that's what, right? He is. But what about having 2 high-volume shooters instead of DeJounte? Who I get having DeJounte in the lineup for sure, but I feel like. I don't know. I almost want DeJounte to play as little. Like, I want him to play without Zion. I want Zion off the floor as much as possible, as much as I can keep those two away.
You would stagger them quite a bit. Stagger them, definitely, those two. But
CJ I feel like makes more sense.
Yeah, and that's why you stagger them. But you got to have, like, Herb Jones loses a lot of his value if he doesn't start because he's such a special defender that you 100%. Want him on the.
I think he has to start. I agree with you there. I was saying CJ over, like, DeJounte probably. But that's the thing. They both deserve to start. They both should start, kind of. Like, they're both starters right now. Like, CJ would be a 6'6" man, but on this team, I mean, he's kind of a starter. They're, second best shooter by a mile.
Yeah, no, I understand your point there, but it's just like at the end of the day, like you can manufacture the lineup so that CJ and Zion are only not playing together for the first 6 minutes of the game. You know what I'm saying? Like, and you could, and maybe what they're going to do is just play Zion at the 5.
Yeah.
And now they will be the worst defense in the league.
Ever again.
Yeah. Like I'm just,
they already couldn't rebound and now they don't have any centers. They were already a bad rebounding team.
Yeah. I'm just confused. I'm really confused. They're like my major question mark team where I'm just like, okay, what are we waiting for here? Like, you need a starting center. It's still basketball. Tall people matter.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Fair enough. Why don't we flip over into the Sacramento Kings? Their big move was getting DeMar DeRozan in the offseason. So, AJ, I'll start with you for this one. Talk to me about your reaction to them getting DeMar and what you think the Kings can be next year.
Yeah, I think I have a hard time getting too excited about it because Domantas Sabonis is still their center. I'm not a Domantas Sabonis fan. But I think that they're going to be a fun team. Like they'll have a lot of guys that can score.
Yeah,
that's for sure. A lot of guys that can score, and DeMar DeRozan's going to help them. And like I was saying with the Mavs, like it's a getting better every single year Western Conference, and it's not going away anytime soon with the Rockets coming up, drafting the best player in the draft, and the Spurs having Victor Wembanyama, and so it's not getting any worse. So in order for them to be a first round playoff exit, it seems like their goal is the Chicago Bulls of the West. You need to be really good to make the top 8 in the Western Conference, and I think that this was quite frankly needed if they wanted to make the top 8 of the West. And he's really going to help them in the half court. I hope he doesn't take the ball too much out of De'Aaron Fox's hands, but I think that they needed to make a move if they wanted to make the playoffs again this year because they missed out this year. And I would have done this move for the price, the asset price, because DeMar DeRozan's a good player. He's going to help them a lot. And I guess that's really it. I don't have too much to say. I don't see them winning a playoff round anytime soon unless they get really lucky in the health department. But to beat one of the Mavs, Thunder, Nuggets, and Timberwolves, and then not even to mention all the other teams like the Lakers, the Warriors, the Rockets coming up, the Spurs with Wemby, in the next couple of years, I'm saying even the Phoenix Suns with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, it's just a tough Western Conference, and they're giving themselves a chance to compete for a playoff spot.
For sure. Matt, what do you got for this move for them?
Yeah, I think it's fun. Like the Kings will be really fun. That's what between Monk and Fox and DeRozan. Like that's so much shot creation. They're all kind of instant offense when you need it. Obviously, you also have Sabonis, who's one of the best offensive bigs in the league, and have his pairing with DeMar. I'm excited to see kind of how they play together because in my head, like it makes sense kind of, but not in the way that it makes a lot of sense with like Monk and Fox, just because of the areas that they both operate in. So yeah, it'll be a fun team. Like their offense should be really, really good. I think the defense will probably struggle quite a bit, especially in that Western Conference. But I like the move. It's definitely a move where it's like it's a move that happened. It doesn't make them any better than like anybody that really matters or anything like that. But when you're the Kings, I think like being a solid playoff team in this Western Conference when you're the Kings, like that's something to hang your hat on. They're going to be competitive. They're going to win games. They also signed back Malik Monk on a really good team friendly deal. I think that it's cool between Monk and DeRozan. Like the Kings are a place where players kind of want to play now. And I think that that's the best part of the Kings offseason is that they've grown from being really the laughing stock of not necessarily just the NBA, but pro sports period into being a destination where it's like, yeah, I can go and play for the Kings and like we'll compete and, be relevant. And it's not, they're not going to win the championship or anything like that. But I think that they had a good offseason. I also really like their draft.
Yeah, Devin Carter, I wanted to mention. He is a top 5 player on my board. I love him. Like he has a real chance to start for them at the end of the year when they're making their push. He's 23 or 22, so he's like he theoretically should be ready to go, but unfortunately, like he got hurt, so he won't.
Yeah,
I don't think he'll make his debut till like November, December.
Gotcha.
But I'm a huge fan of him and what he can be. So I really like their draft. And Malik Monk on 4 years, $78 million. Like I was willing as Pistons to go 4 years, 120, 130.
Yeah.
Like I was willing to really go after him. So in order to secure him for probably less money than he could have made, like that was a A+ move on their part. So I was a fan of their overall offseason, even though like they're still in the same tier for me, as in terms of competing in the Western Conference. But I like their offseason overall. I think that they got better.
For sure.
I wanted to make hey, Devin Carter with Keon Ellis lineups. I'm looking forward to those. I really like watching both of them play. They're both going to play. They're both going to defend their talent. Like those lineups will be a lot of fun.
A lot of fun. And they're going to be like a must-watch team at the 10 o'clock summer. The 10 o'clock
right.
NBA League Pass. Like they're going to be a League Pass team. Yeah. They're going to be a fun team to watch. So
for sure. So I'm going to switch into that question of like any other West moves. So we talked about it in the East, like going through those teams. So in the West, was there any other moves that you guys liked, you were surprised about, maybe you didn't like, anything like that in any of the other West teams? Matt, I'm going to start with you for this one.
Yeah, I think you got to start with the Thunder. I mean, they add 2 of the best role players in the league in Isaiah Hartenstein and Alex Caruso. I think that they knock out the draft. They get 3, borderline first-round talents, in my opinion, in the draft. They lose essentially nothing. They add Caruso and Hartenstein, and the biggest thing that they lost was Josh Giddey, who essentially single-handedly sunk lineups last year because he's just such a non-factor offensively and such a bad defender. When he is like your 4th option, he quite literally is completely useless. And into that role, you add Alex Caruso, who is literally essentially designed in a lab to do what Josh Giddey could not do last season. He's one of the best guard defenders in basketball. He's going to shoot over 40% from 3. He's one of the best cutters in the league, one of the best off-ball passers in the league. He's going to juice you in transition. He's going to create turnovers. He's like perfectly fit, built in the lab to play with this Thunder team. And adding him in Josh Giddey's minutes, I think, is in and of itself like going to be a huge swing for them. I think that alone takes them to a whole new level. But then also you add Isaiah Hartenstein, who will likely come off the bench, and I think there's some concern about him not being able to shoot while the Thunder tend to try and play 5 out and have 5 shooters on the floor. And I'm not really super concerned with that. I think he's one of the best screeners in the league. He's one of the best defensive bigs in the league. He's one of the best rebounders in the league. Offensively, he has real utility even if he can't really shoot. He's a great play finisher around the rim, has some of the best touch in the league. He's a fantastic passer. As much as OKC values shooting, they also value decision making, and Hartenstein kind of has that in spades. I think this team went out. Their biggest problem last season was Josh Giddey, and they replaced that with a guy who's going to play that role at an A-plus level, basically. They also add one of the best rebounders in the league. That was their other biggest problem last season. Like, I've got no qualms with their offseason at all. They did nothing but get way better, already having been the first seed in one of the best conferences, frankly, we've ever really seen. You can't have a better offseason, I think, than going from, hey, we're in the mix, a contender, to being, in my opinion, the contender in the West.
For sure. AJ, you got anything to add to that?
I totally agree. They became the favorites overnight for the Western Conference. And they added two superstar role players, just like Matt said. Alex Caruso is an absolute stud, and Isaiah Hartenstein. We'll see how that kind of works, because going from having some lineups to play 5 out, some to not. Chet now has to move to the floor, to the 4 rather than the 5. That's going to be. It's going to
starting.
Well, all right. So then he's playing 20 minutes tonight as just the most overpaid backup center in the league.
That's what he was. Because
I would be
the best backup center in the league.
Yeah, I'm in for it, but there's going to be times where he closes. They're going to play together at some point. Yeah. That's going to be an adjustment.
He's just another look.
So and I wouldn't even hate Hartenstein starting, because I would rather him play the starting centers. You know what I'm saying? Actually take the physical tear off of Chet a little bit, because Chet looked exhausted come playoff time. I think Chet let's not forget that they have in Jalen Williams and Chet, or they have 2 now going in year 3 guys that were borderline All NBA last year. And if those guys take another leap, Jalen Williams had a bad playoffs, and they still almost made the Western Conference Finals. Chet, he kind of struggled a little bit in that second round of the playoffs. I think taking the physical burden off of him a little bit for 20, 30 minutes a night with Isaiah Hartenstein is going to help a lot. I'm really excited. I think that this team is the favorite in the Western Conference, and these moves kind of solidified that.
Yeah, no, they were my favorite offseason for sure. Adding Alex Caruso, right when I heard the move, I was like, oh my gosh, this team just got that much better, because he's one of my favorite role players in the NBA. And then getting Isaiah Hartenstein, winning that, is just so huge, because all we talked about last year was how OKC needed a center, and they finally have gotten that center. They've gotten that piece, and just like AJ said, it's going to help Chet. It's going to help everybody be able to play to their strengths. And I really think with OKC, it puts them right at the top, near that contender role. And it's going to be scary, man. I love their coach, Mark Daigneault. I mean, he's just unbelievable, really puts people in the right spots, has amazing adjustments. I absolutely love him. So the Thunder are going to be one of my favorite teams to watch next year, and I'm super excited.
And this team was fingertips away from beating Dallas, and their second and third best players got outplayed by PJ Washington and Derrick Jones. And they still almost won that series. Yeah,
no, it's crazy. It is flat out crazy. AJ, who do you got for a Western Conference team that kind of surprised you, or you just thought didn't do a good job?
Yeah, so I'm going to go on the negative side here, because this is the most relevant, I believe, is the Denver Nuggets.
Okay.
In my opinion, just they got some bad luck, but also just a poor organization. It seemed like an organizational failure to not retain KCP.
Yep.
And he made that starting lineup work for the most. Obviously it's Jokic, but there's only maybe 10 guards in the league, 5 guards in the league that defend at his level and shoot at his level. And the other 4 are probably on max contracts.
Yep.
The Orlando Magic did not give him some crazy contract, and being scared of the second apron, I think, is really just a poor excuse. You have Nikola Jokic, who's the best player in your franchise's history, might be the best player in your franchise's history ever. And this is going 50 years in the future. It's so rare to be a small market team and to have the best player in the world who's won 3 of the last 4 MVPs
and won a ring.
Yeah. Many argue should have won the last 4 MVPs in a row. And to not go, if there's ever a reason to go into the second apron, which you could get out of in 2 years when Michael Porter's contract's up, like it doesn't make sense to me to not pay KCP.
Yeah.
Who was like a core member of your starting lineup. And now we're looking and they're probably starting. And then they got rid of Reggie Jackson for 3 second-round picks, which is I believe the highest price paid to get off of contract this offseason besides Harrison Barnes. So the second highest paid price, and you only got rid of $5 million.
Yeah.
Like, that should not have costed that much. And then, so we kind of thought that money would be used to go towards KCP, in which case that is very reasonable. And instead, they didn't. They decided not to match that, and then they decided to pay Dario Saric, the taxpayer mid-level, and okay, he'll play 12 minutes when Jokic is off the floor, but I don't think that they were competing with Dario Saric for anything with anybody. So, at the end of the day, I just don't really get it. It didn't make much sense to me. They're relying now on Christian Brown, who can't shoot at a high enough level. They have nobody to shoot besides Michael Porter Jr. And they, in my eyes, if they would have retained KCP, they'd still be the Western Conference favorites, in my opinion. And then their 23rd draft pick, this is no fault of their own, but Darren Holmes just tore his Achilles, so he's out for the year, and they probably expected him to contribute this year. So they're just so that's the part that not their fault, right? A little bit unlucky, but the KCP, not paying KCP is just it's a total disaster for them. And in my opinion, unless Christian Brown or Peyton Watson really, really, really take a leap, or Julian Strawther, who I like, but you don't want to rely when you're competing for championships. You don't want to rely on internal development until they force you to play them and start them and make these kind of decisions. And I don't think that these guys are good enough to do that. And it's just really unfortunate.
Yeah. No, to add on to that with the Nuggets, last year, it seemed like we talked about just how drained Jokic and Murray were in that game 7, that all the pressure was on them. And that's what they were focused on. Losing a guy like KCP and not really getting too much better in this offseason just really, really didn't make sense, because it seemed like if they get past the Timberwolves, both of us were talking they're probably favorites against the Mavericks, because they match up better with the Mavericks than the Timberwolves ever did. And then we're looking at a Celtics Nuggets series where all of us said we had no idea who to pick in that series, even with the healthy Celtics, So the Nuggets were in a good spot. And losing a guy like KCP knocks them down just a little bit. And they added a guy like Russell Westbrook and stuff, and we'll see how those things fit. But I think losing a guy like KCP is just killer, like you were saying. Matt, what do you got on that one?
Yeah, they cheaped out, plain and simple. That's exactly what happened, which is unfortunate. The second apron obviously scared everybody kind of to a degree. And so, I guess you could say that they were what they did looks a little bit better when you look back at it now and seeing that nobody felt comfortable playing with the second apron if they could. But at the end of the day, this is Nikola Jokic's prime. You have one of the best players ever, the best player in the world, at the peak of his powers right now, and you didn't do every single thing you could to put the best team around him. Losing KCP is very detrimental. Is he their 5th starter? Yeah, but also he's literally exactly what they need in a 5th starter. I think you talked about the shooting and losing that, and that's important, but also defensively, he was super important to them. I think Jokic has real deficiencies on that end, and I feel like what KCP was able to do as a screen navigator at the point of attack, how he was able to contain ball handlers and a lot of how he was able to defend kind of from disadvantage, I think was super important to masking sort of a lot of what Jokic could do. And Christian Brown is obviously, what his calling card is on the defensive end as an athlete. And so he'll be able to provide some of that. But when he's on the floor, he's not going to be nearly the level of shooting threat that KCP was. I think with Strawther, it's kind of there's a little bit of a bet on Strawther here because I think offensively he can probably do some of what KCP does if he is what you kind of hope that he can be, if he is the level of shooter that you expect him to be. I know he's really good in the G League last season. I know he had a really good summer league. Maybe he can be, an NBA rotation player now, but that's a very young guy to be throwing into a championship contender, despite how much you might believe in him. Yeah, it was a rough offseason for them. I'm kind of interested in the Russell Westbrook, Dario Saric stuff a little bit, I guess, like those moves. I don't know. I mean, Russell Westbrook had like the worst playoffs you can even imagine from an individual player. But you're going to get the best out of guys when they're playing with Jokic, and maybe they can sort of mold him into a Bruce Brown-ish type thing going. And Saric is I like Saric, honestly. So I wasn't super mad at that. I think like for what they need or like what they could have done at backup big, he's probably about as good as it could have got. I thought Holmes would have contributed pretty much right away if he was given the opportunity to, but like you mentioned, AJ, he got hurt. So yeah, just a terrible offseason. I mean, they're still a contender because they have the best player in the league, and they still have 4 very good starters. You know, like this is still a really, really good team, but losing KCP is a rough one to swallow.
Yeah, my quick counterpoint to the second apron stuff about a lot of teams being scared of is that like there's when you're in championship contention, like that is the time to go into it. Like I understand, like
100%.
I don't understand, like the Clippers. Like I think they just cheaped out, even though like Steve Ballmer doesn't care about money. But like when you look at like the Milwaukee Bucks being in the second apron, like they have Giannis, the best player in their franchise history since Kareem, and like the Boston Celtics, like they're committed to going into the second apron now for a couple of years after their extensions that they took place. And there's like several other like the Phoenix Suns who aren't even in. Like I that's not a good excuse. And the Cronkies have a ton of money.
Yeah.
So like there's no real excuse other than them being cheap. And so that's just the counterpoint that I wanted to put out there.
For sure.
Yeah, like at the end of the day, they cheaped out. No doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. So before we go, I wanted to get your guys' initial favorites out of the East and the West. So I'm going to start with Matt here. Matt, give me your favorites for the East and the West going into the year.
Well, I mean, I feel like you got to go Boston. They just dominated. I mean, it was a relatively light run, you could say, but they just dominated the entire playoffs despite not having one of their best players for most of it. And I mean, every regular season they're a machine too. I think they have one of the best coaches in the league. They have the best group, like they have the best 3 through 6 in the league, without a doubt. Like they got to be the favorite in the East, and in the West, I think it's the Thunder. Like I said, they were the 1 seed last year, very close to making the conference finals. They got significantly better in the offseason. They still have a ton of picks. They still have a ton of room to make moves if so need. Yeah, I think those two are kind of clear for me right now. I don't really have any problems picking them. Like I don't have to think about it much. I think those are the two at the top of the league.
For sure. AJ, what do you got?
Yeah, I agree. Those are the 2 favorites. I don't think those would be my picks just because I like to spice it up a little bit. But the Porzingis injury, he got surgery after the season, and he's out until at least mid-December. So that's probably more like January. That's a little scary. Anytime a 7-1 guy goes under, or probably more like 7-3. But yeah, anytime like they have a lower body injury that needs surgery, like that's worth noting, especially with the guy with Porzingis's injury past. That's worth noting. But I think that they're still the favorites. If they play a healthy Philly, like I'd be like 50-50 on that, I think. But like the chances that Philly gets there healthy are a lot smaller than Boston getting there healthy, even with the Porzingis factor. And then I think it's the Thunder. But in the West, like just because I think that they're a pretty clear favorite at this point, like I think that they're like probably a 55% favorite against like Dallas, a 50%, like 51% against Denver, 50%, 52% against the Timberwolves. Even against the Suns, if they match up with the Suns, like I actually like a lot of what the Suns did. I think that they have a chance to compete more so than the general public does. Like there still is like a slight favorite in each series, but like kind of the overarching favorite in the Western Conference, which is kind of weird to think about. But I would agree that the Thunder and the Celtics are the 2 favorites heading into the season.
Yeah, no, I agree completely too. Like the Thunder, again, we talked about just how great the Thunder's offseason was, and I think it kind of put them over the Nuggets with us being positive on the Thunder and negative on the Nuggets. So Thunder there, and then the Celtics just dominated the East. So, like, you can't put anybody else there. So I agree with the Celtics there.
One thing I want to mention in the Eastern Conference, too, that I don't think is getting enough discussion about is the Indiana Pacers. I ripped on the Pacers a lot during their playoff run, but I think that they have a real chance to be, like, in contention for the number 1 seed. And that's mainly due to Tyrese Halliburton playing like he did the first 2 months of the season, where he's just like the walking number 1 offense in the NBA.
Yeah.
And the development that we saw from Andrew Nemhard, like, I can actually see the Indiana Pacers kind of give, at least for the number 1 seed, giving them a run for their money. And I just wanted to throw that out there before we ended.
For sure. Matt, you got anything else before we close up?
I don't know. I think I'm lower on the Pacers. My vision for the Pacers right now, I think that they're going to be one of those teams like the Hawks kind of used to be or something. Like, they're just always a top 4 seed, and then they just always lose to whoever goes to the finals, whether it be in the second.
Yeah, that might be true.
Yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. Like, because I think, like, their system helps them a lot. I think, like, playing fast like that is a legitimate, massive advantage. They have 2 point guards who can run it. I mean, those, like you talk about Halliburton being a walking number 1 offense, and obviously the offense was great when he was off the floor and it was Nemhard, they were the number 2 offense. It doesn't really drop off. So, like, they're just kind of going to always have that to kind of rely on, and you're never really going to play a lot of teams that are playing like the Pacers night in, night out. I don't know about number 1 seed, but that's an interesting take. I'll have to eat that one up a little bit. Do I have anything else? No, I don't think so. I think the Nets had a great offseason for what they needed to do. Getting their pick back and kind of setting themselves up to be the worst team in the league in a great draft. They also had a Killian Hayes, so I appreciated that. So big thumbs up, double thumbs up for the Nets offseason for me.
Non-guaranteed deal for Killian Hayes.
The Killian Hayes pick and roll is going to generate 1.5 points per possession. You guys will see.
Yeah, I guess we will.
For sure. All right. Well, that is going to wrap up Jake's takes for today. Thank you guys so much for listening, watching, wherever you guys are at. I appreciate it. And we'll be back at you guys next time. Peace.